So I've got a couple of questions. One from Susanna, which says, isn't this all an attempt by the government to destroy general practice and the partnership model? Neil, I'll leave you that. I'll pass that one to you.
Well, I'll tell you what, this all started, I'm going to name him because I think I should. It all started with Nigel Watson's partnership review. And that's Dr. Nigel Watson on the GPC and chair of Wessex LMC. And what he was asked to do was to write a partnership review which protected the independent status partnership. That was the whole objective of that thing. Now, whether or not he's achieved it, I think, you know, you'll have to be the judge, but that was the underlying purpose of it. And if you think about what's the alternative, I mean, it's very clear that there is a push towards at-scale working. And if you're going to work at scale, you've got to do something. So you could merge the practices. Well, you don't want to do that probably. Or you could get acquired and moved into the trusts. Well, that's happening in parts of the country, and that certainly was on the long-term plan, was that as an option, and that's still there as an option. Or you do something else, and this was Nigel Watson's view as the something else. And it was adopted really quickly, and the government adopted it, and all of the papers I see talk about PCNs. Now, you know, I've got no more crystal ball than anybody else, but I don't see how this leads to the end of the independent status. Status. I just don't see it. But you know, that would certainly. I can't tell you what the government's going to do. Sajid Javid said he's going to nationalise everybody. Well, maybe he is, but I don't see it myself. But then again, you know, I appreciate some people look at it that way.
I think the honest opinion is we're not able to actually answer that. We can only give you a personal opinion, and certainly the Wesleyan, one of the groups that we interact quite closely with, our advisory board, and that's senior people involved with the politics and senior doctors and so on. And the indication, certainly on the general practice, is that the intention is to retain the partnership model long term, but things will evolve and things will change across the board, and it's very much that high level, but that's about the level of response. Really good question, this one there. And it's what happens at the end of the 5-year plan, especially if we get a change of government in 2024, and says we've been here before with model changes, i.e. the GP fund holding when that went. So again, we've got a plan from launch in 2019 and commitment through to 2024. Again, I'll give you the Wesleyan understanding, and certainly the guidance from our advisory board is that this shared service model, whether the name primary care network remains, but the idea of a shared service model is here long term, is the indication that we've been told, and it's about as much we can take. But Niels?
I'll give you my crystal ball, and that is that I haven't got a clue. But what I will tell you is that if it was me, I'd be looking to minimise my risks around what might happen after the 5 years is up. Because if you think about it, if after the 5 years the plug gets pulled on PCNs, which might happen, I don't think it will, but it might do, then what? If all of the liability sits in your partnership, then you're going to have to pay the bill to sort the problem out, which is potentially make everybody redundant. I don't know what you're going to do, to be honest. If, on the other hand, you've moved all of the PCN activity into a limited liability company where you have no real exposure to it because you've only got £1 share and you haven't moved a whole load of assets into it, which is the model of the shared service centre, then if something terrible happened, like, for example, the plug got pulled on PCNs, your total exposure as a practice is £1. Whereas if it's in your practice, which is the current contractual model, then your exposure is as big as the exposure is. And don't forget, some of these Rs resources might have 20 years worth of pension on there. And if they have that, that's a very, very big redundancy bill. So if you move it all into a company, you remove almost all of that risk, which is one reason why I think it's quite a good idea to do it. Because I don't have a crystal ball which will tell you what the government will do. I have no idea.
We have one final. Can I just add, in terms of risks, that's not No, I was just going to say, in terms of risks, that's not going to go away, whether you are a part of a PCN network federation, however it's set up. The liabilities, the cyber, and all the other risks that are involved, they're still there. And it's always prudent to make sure you do that risk analysis at least every year, just to make sure you're covered and protected in the ways you need to be.
We've got another one there.
I've got two more if we've got a couple of moments. Question, can CCGs pay the NHS fundings now directly into a PCN bank account? Honestly, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Good question. Good question. So depends where you live. Some CCGs say they can, and some CCGs say they can't. So given that a year ago they all said they can't, it seems to me that there is a move towards that they can. And if you live in the right part of the country, then maybe you've got there already. There's different parts. So they will be able to. And again, if you incorporate that, then helps, because it takes it out of the practices and puts it into a more obvious place. Next one.
Next question. Is it worth a practice pulling out of a PCN given the personal risks and liabilities involved? Again, my immediate response is there's no structure that doesn't have personal risks and personal liabilities. And I think my view would be it's about getting those addressed, and much along the lines we've talked about today. But Neil's just certainly immediately going to respond to that one.
Okay. No is the short answer, because you can't. I hate to say it, but PCNs are a bit like Hotel California. You can check out, but you just can't leave, because the reality is that it's in your contracts now, in your GMS and PMS contracts, that you must provide your patients with PCN services. So if you actually try and check out of the PCN DES, you still get caught by it. You just don't get paid anything for the pleasure of doing it. Whereas at least if you're in it, then you have the funding comes in. If you check out, you've got to do this whole lot, but without getting paid. And yes, in theory, the responsibility passes to somebody else, but actually most of the risk doesn't. So my advice is that that's not a path that you want to do without thinking about it very hard, because it doesn't get you free of all of these problems. It in fact creates even more. And I promise you, I'm talking from experience. I know plenty of ones where they tried to do this. It's hard. It's very painful. Yeah, I know it says on the tin you can opt out, but it isn't that straightforward, I promise you. But if you're thinking of doing, please do give me a call and I'll give you a bit more color around it.
Good advice. Yeah, speak to the man this man, he knows. What are the difficulties with setting up a PCN? Sorry, what are the difficulties with setting up a PCN company down the line? What happens if no one wants to take over from retiring directors?
Okay, so what you do is if you mitigate the structural risk through a company, the way we recommend you do it is that the PCN representatives from each practice simply get 3 hats: PCN representative, shareholder, and director. So that just comes with the job. So unless your practice can't find a PCN representative, but that will then be a problem from a PCN level, then it just follows with that. It's not a question of you be the PCN representative, you be the shareholder, you be the director. Combine the whole lot into one, and it kind of moves with that job. So by signing up to the PCN DES, of course, you're committing to a whole load of governance and committing to being participating in it. So we tie all of those all those together. And if as a practice you decide your PCN representative is going to change, then you would change the other bits as well, the shareholder and the director. So the question then becomes, what if your practice can't find a PCN representative, which would be a problem? So I hope that answers that question.
We've overrun by a couple of minutes, so I'm going to make this the last question. I think it actually is the last question in here, but again, can I just say thank you to all those of you who've stayed with us, and pretty much everybody that we've got the same numbers at the end of this call as we had at the beginning. So thank you for your patience. I hope it's been useful for you. So one more question, and again, Nils, is coming your way. Can the PCN finance practice transfer money to the PCN Limited company company's bank account, which in turn pays our salaries, etc.
Right. This isn't. This is slightly complicated, so just be ready. Okay, I'm going to talk about the money flows and the way it works. The company, don't forget, is within a VAT cost sharing group because you're trying to avoid the whole VAT problem. And remember, one of the rules about the VAT cost sharing group is that it's at cost. You must pay the company for the services it provides at cost. Otherwise, you move outside the rules of the VAT cost sharing group, and then you're back into the problem that you've got at the moment. You can generate VAT. So what happens is the money turns up, the DES money turns up into the nominated bank account, which for most PCNs is one of the practices, unless you happen to be fortunate enough to live in that part of the country where they allow you to pay into something else. But let's say it turns up in the nominated bank account. Now, that at the moment is all mixed up. It's some kind of big spaghetti mixing practice and PCN money. You separate those two out, and then you kind of put the PCN money into a separate place. Now, if you incorporate, that separate place would be in the company bank account, but not in the operating bank account. What we recommend is you have two bank accounts in the company, one being a business current account from which you pay the salaries, and whoever asked the question, it sounded like it would be your salary as well. So you pay the salaries of the employees of the company from the business current account. The second account, and this is the really important one, is a trust account. What that is an account held in the company's name, but it holds it on behalf of the practices. So the PCN money, the DES money that arrived in the nominated bank account, is moved into the company trust account, which is the PCN account belonging to the practices. And then as you need to pay the salaries from the company, you then move money from the trust account into the business current account, enabling the company to be financed. So basically, the short answer to your question is the employees are in the company pays them, but the money to get to the company is transferred from the practices, from the PCN as it's needed, but otherwise stays outside of the company until it's needed. The reason for that is because if you transfer too much into the company, you'll make profits in the company, you break the rules of the VAT cost sharing group. So sorry, it was a bit complicated, but very happy to take that more slowly outside of the meeting before you all sort of want to disappear. Please do give me a call if you want to talk that one through again.
There is a very quick one come through there. If we have got time to translate, what is your exposure as a director of a PCN company?
I've got a good answer to that one. So at the moment, as a partner in a GP practice, what is your exposure? Your exposure is unlimited. You can lose your house. As a director of a company, you do have a residual amount of liability. That residual liability is very small. It's certainly a lot smaller than losing your house. It's perhaps in percentage terms 1 or 2% of the unlimited liability you've got as a partner. There is some there, and I won't underplay it, but you've got to be doing some pretty bad things before that kicks in. You know, it's verging on criminal before that kicks in. That said, if you want to deal with that residual liability, there's always insurance, and these gentlemen would be very happy to talk to you about it. But believe me, it's a lot less than the unlimited liability you've got as a partner.
Can I repeat my thanks to everybody who's joined us this evening? And we had one final question, which I'm going to answer. It says, any top tips on how to sleep soundly tonight? I'm very much hoping that the message that we're trying to give across this, and it can be complicated, particularly around the legal side of things, the structural side of things. But I hope those two QR codes there say, look, there are solutions to pretty much everything. The answer to what is right for your network, for you as individuals, will depend on your personal circumstances and what you're trying to achieve. But please do talk to Nils and contact DR solicitors if you've got questions about the structural side of it, and the more operational stuff, please talk to us. We'll be more than happy to help. And I think if you know that there's a potential solution out there, I hope that will mean that you can sleep soundly tonight. So
I assure you, you can sleep soundly tonight. The problems aren't that big, but the problems are getting bigger. So it's worth thinking about them. They're much bigger now than they were 2 years ago, and they're only going to get bigger. I can only reiterate what Graham said, which is take advice, but take advice from people who know what they're talking about. Look for the specialists, lawyers, accountants, solicitors, insurers. Go to the specialists, because this is quite complicated. It's much more complicated than the olden days. So long as you get specialist help, people who know what they're talking about, you'll be fine. You can sleep at night.